The morning sun cast long shadows across the sprawling military training facility as Maya adjusted her tactical gear for the 100th time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of what lay ahead. Today marked her final evaluation before joining the most elite special operations unit in the country, and she was the only woman among the 250 candidates who had made it this far. Maya stood 5 feet 4 inches tall, with a lean but muscular build that spoke of years of dedicated training. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her brown eyes held a steely determination that had carried her through every challenge thrown her way. At 26, she had already broken barriers in the military, but this was different. This was the ultimate test. The other candidates towered around her, their conversations filled with bravado and testosterone-fueled confidence. She caught fragments of their discussions about previous missions, about their achievements, about how they planned to dominate the upcoming trials. Some glanced her way with curiosity, others with barely concealed skepticism. A few looked at her with something that made her skin crawl, the assumption that she didn't belong here. "You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart?" The voice belonged to Jake, a 6'3" former Marine with shoulders like a linebacker and an ego to match. He had been making snide comments since the selection process began 3 months ago, each one designed to chip away at her confidence. "The administrative offices are in the building next door." Maya didn't respond immediately. She had learned long ago that reacting to every provocation only gave bullies more ammunition. Instead, she continued checking her equipment, ensuring every strap was tight, every piece of gear properly positioned. Her silence seemed to irritate more than any comeback could have. "I heard they had to lower the standards just to get a woman this far," continued, his voice carrying across the assembly area. Several other candidates turned to listen, some nodding in agreement, others looking uncomfortable. "Makes you wonder what's next. Maybe they'll start giving participation trophies." This time, Maya looked up. Her gaze met, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink down to just the two of them. There was something in her eyes that made him shift uncomfortably, though he covered it with a broader smirk. "The standards haven't been lowered for anyone," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness. "We're all here because we earned it." Laughed, a harsh sound that attracted more attention. "Right, and I'm sure it had nothing to do with politics or quotas or any of that feel-good nonsense they're pushing these days." The circle of candidates around them had grown larger. Maya could feel their eyes on her, some sympathetic, others eager for drama. This was exactly what she had hoped to avoid. She had trained harder than anyone, pushed herself beyond every limit, all to prove that she belonged here on merit alone. Now was turning her presence into a spectacle. "You know what I think?" Stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath and see the challenge in his pale blue eyes. "I think you're going to wash out in the first hour. I think all this diversity push is going to come crashing down when reality hits." Maya felt her pulse quicken, not from anger but from something deeper. She had faced this doubt her entire military career, first in basic training, then in ranger school, then in every assignment that followed. Each time she had let her performance speak for itself. But something about his tone, about the way he was performing for their audience, made her realize that staying silent wasn't an option this time. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked, her voice still calm but with an edge that made several nearby candidates step back slightly. His grin widened. He was enjoying this, feeding off the attention and the opportunity to establish his dominance. "I'm suggesting that when the real tests begin, when the bullets start flying and the pressure gets turned up to 11, you're going to crack. And when you do, it's going to put everyone else at risk." The words hung in the air like smoke from a grenade. Maya felt the familiar fire building in her chest, the same flame that had driven her through every obstacle course, every combat simulation, every moment when someone told her she couldn't do something. But alongside the anger was something else, a cold, calculating awareness that had just made a crucial mistake. "You seem pretty confident about that," she said, taking a step forward. The movement was subtle but shifted backward instinctively. "Want to put your money where your mouth is." The challenge surprised him. He had expected her to either back down or lose her temper, both of which would have served his purpose. Instead, she was calling his bluff and doing it in front of an audience that was now fully invested in the outcome. "What kind of money?" asked, his voice still cocky but with a hint of uncertainty creeping in. Maya glanced around at the assembled candidates, then back at, "Pick any test, any challenge. Right here, right now. If I fail, I'll withdraw from the program voluntarily. If I succeed." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "You apologize to every woman who's ever served in the military and admit that maybe, just maybe, you've been wrong about what it takes to be elite." The silence that followed was deafening. Looked around at the crowd, realizing that he had painted himself into a corner. Backing down now would make him look weak in front of the very people he was trying to impress. But accepting the challenge meant risking public humiliation if Maya somehow managed to outperform him. "Fine," he said finally, his voice louder than necessary. "But I get to pick the test." Maya nodded once sharply. "Your choice." His mind raced through the possibilities. He needed something that would highlight the physical differences between them, something that would play to his strengths and her weaknesses. His eyes lit up as an idea formed. "Hand-to-hand combat," he announced. "No weapons, no rules, just straight-up fighting until one of us can't continue." A murmur went through the crowd. Several candidates looked concerned, while others seemed excited by the prospect of witnessing a real fight. Maya felt a flutter of something that might have been nervousness, but she pushed it aside. She had trained in close-quarters combat for years, studying under some of the best instructors in the military. Was bigger and stronger, but size wasn't everything in a real fight. "Accepted," she said without hesitation. His confidence returned in full force. He was 6 inches taller and outweighed her by at least 60 pounds of muscle. He had been a champion wrestler in high school and had dominated hand-to-hand training throughout his military career. In his mind, this was already over. "You sure about this?" asked Captain Sarah, one of the few other women in the candidate pool. She had approached during the exchange, her face tight with concern. "You don't have anything to prove to these idiots." Maya appreciated the support, but she had passed the point of no return. "I'm sure," she replied. "Sometimes you have to make a stand." Word of the impromptu match spread quickly through the training facility. Within minutes, a crowd of instructors, candidates, and support personnel had gathered in the main gymnasium. The space was vast, with high ceilings and padded floors designed for exactly this kind of training. Maya found herself standing in the center of a circle that seemed to stretch for miles. Chief Petty Officer Williams, the senior instructor for the program, pushed through the crowd with obvious annoyance. Williams was a legend in special operations circles, a man who had seen combat on every continent and trained some of the most elite warriors in the world. He was also known for his no-nonsense approach to discipline. "What the hell is going on here?" Williams demanded, his voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. Stepped forward, chest puffed out with self-importance. "Just settling a question about standards, Chief. Nothing that can't be handled quickly." Williams looked from to Maya, his dark eyes missing nothing. He had been watching both candidates throughout the selection process, noting their strengths and weaknesses, their leadership potential and character flaws. Was skilled but arrogant, the kind of operator who could be brilliant in the field but toxic to team cohesion. Maya was unknown quantity, untested at this level but showing promise that went beyond physical capabilities. "This is highly irregular," Williams said finally. "The evaluation process exists for a reason. We don't settle disputes with playground fights." "With respect, Chief," Maya said, stepping forward, "this isn't about a dispute. It's about proving that merit, not assumptions, should determine who belongs in this program." Williams studied her for a long moment, seeing something in her posture and tone that reminded him of himself at a much younger age. He had faced his own share of doubters, his own moments where everything came down to a single test of will and ability. 10 minutes, he said finally. "No permanent damage, no weapons, stop when I say stop, and when this is over, we don't speak of it again. The real evaluation continues tomorrow as scheduled." The crowd pressed closer as Maya and faced each other in the center of the mat. Was already loosening up, rolling his shoulders and flexing his hands. He moved with the confident swagger of someone who had never lost a physical confrontation, every gesture designed to intimidate and dominate. Maya stood perfectly still, her breathing slow and controlled. She had learned years ago that the moments before a fight were as important as the fight itself. This was when fear tried to take hold, when doubt whispered poisonous thoughts about failure and humiliation. She had developed techniques for silencing those voices, for channeling nervous energy into focused determination. "You can still back out," said quietly so only she could hear. "Admit you don't belong here and save yourself some pain." Maya met his gaze steadily. I appreciate the concern, she replied, her voice equally quiet, but I think you're the one who should be worried. His expression darkened. He had expected fear, uncertainty, maybe even tears. Instead, he saw something that made his stomach clench with unease. Maya was not backing down, not showing any sign of the intimidation he had worked so hard to create. If anything, she seemed to be getting calmer as the moment approached. Begin, Williams called out. Moved immediately, launching himself forward with the aggressive confidence that had served him well in countless training scenarios. He was fast for his size, closing the distance between them in 2 quick steps, his right hand reaching out to grab Maya's shoulder and pull her into a grappling position where his size advantage would be decisive. Maya wasn't there. She moved like water, flowing aside from his charge with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. His grasping hand found empty air, and his forward momentum carried him past her defensive position. Before he could recover his balance, Maya's foot swept behind his ankle, sending him stumbling toward the edge of the mat. Caught himself before falling, spinning around with his face flushed red from embarrassment and growing anger. The crowd was murmuring now, some in surprise, others in appreciation of Maya's technique. He had expected to overpower her immediately, to end this humiliation before it really began. Instead, he looked clumsy and off balance while she stood calmly in the center of the mat, waiting for his next move. Lucky, he muttered, loud enough for the nearest spectators to hear. Won't happen again. Maya didn't respond. She had shifted into combat mode now, a mental state she had cultivated through years of training and real-world experience. In this state, emotion became irrelevant, ego disappeared, and everything focused down to the immediate tactical situation. Was angry, which made him predictable. He was embarrassed, which made him reckless. These were advantages she could exploit. Second attack was more cautious but no less aggressive. He approached with his hands up, looking for an opening to grab her or land a decisive blow. He feinted left, then lunged right, trying to corner her against the edge of the mat where her mobility would be limited. This time Maya didn't dodge. Instead, she moved into his attack, closing the distance between them faster than he anticipated. Her left hand deflected his reaching arm while her right struck upward toward his solar plexus. Managed to twist away from the worst of the impact, but the blow still knocked the wind from his lungs and sent him staggering backward. The crowd's murmur grew louder. This wasn't going according to anyone's expectations. Was supposed to be dominating the smaller opponent, using his size and strength to overwhelm her defenses. Instead, Maya was controlling the pace and distance of the fight, making him look increasingly frustrated and uncoordinated. His third attack came with real fury behind it. His pride was stinging, his confidence shaken, and he could hear the whispers from the crowd that told him his reputation was on the line. He charged forward with everything he had, throwing a wild haymaker that would have ended the fight if it connected. Maya ducked under the punch so smoothly it looked choreographed. As his fist whistled over her head, she grabbed his extended arm with both hands and used his own momentum to throw him across her shoulder in a perfect judo throw. Hit the mat hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs and sending a shock of pain up his spine. For a moment, the gymnasium was completely silent. Lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling lights, trying to understand what had just happened. He was the bigger fighter, the stronger fighter, the one with all the advantages. How was he on the ground while Maya stood over him, barely breathing hard? Stay down, Maya said quietly, her voice carrying no malice or triumph. This doesn't have to get worse. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and finally, burning rage. The idea that this woman, this symbol of everything he believed was wrong with the military's new direction, was offering him mercy was more than he could bear. He rolled to his feet with a snarl, his tactical mind completely overwhelmed by wounded pride and masculine fury. You think you're better than me? He spat, circling her like a caged animal. You think pulling some fancy moves makes you elite? Maya tracked his movement but didn't respond. She could see that it passed beyond rational thought, that whatever happened next would be driven by emotion rather than strategy. This made him more dangerous in some ways, but also more predictable. I'm going to show everyone here what happens when reality meets political correctness, continued, his voice getting louder. I'm going to show them that all the diversity training in the world can't change basic biology. The words hit Maya like a slap, not because they hurt, but because they revealed so much about his mindset. To him, This wasn't about military readiness or individual capability. It was about maintaining a worldview where success was determined by demographics rather than merit. He couldn't accept that a woman might outfight him because that would shatter fundamental assumptions about his own superiority. His final attack was everything the previous ones had been, but amplified. He came at Maya with pure aggression, throwing combinations of punches and kicks designed to overwhelm her defenses through sheer volume and intensity. For a few seconds, it almost worked. Maya found herself backing up, deflecting and dodging attacks that came too fast to counter effectively. Then made his critical mistake. Drunk on his apparent success, he threw a powerful right cross that would have been devastating if it landed. But Maya had been waiting for exactly this moment, when his balance would be compromised and his guard would drop. She stepped inside's punch, letting it graze past her shoulder, and delivered a precise uppercut to his chin. The blow wasn't thrown with maximum power. Maya was still trying to avoid causing serious injury, but it was perfectly placed and timed. His head snapped back, his eyes rolled upward, and his legs turned to rubber beneath him. He toppled backward like a felled tree, unconscious before he hit the mat. The silence that followed was absolute. 250 of the most elite military personnel in the country stood frozen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Maya, the woman that Jake had dismissed as weak, as a diversity hire, as someone who didn't belong in their exclusive club, had just knocked him unconscious with a single punch. Chief Williams stepped onto the mat and knelt beside, checking his pulse and breathing. After a moment, he looked up at Maya, who stood perfectly still, waiting for his assessment. "He'll be fine," Williams said. "Might have a headache when he wakes up, but no permanent damage." He stood up and faced the assembled crowd. "Show's over. Everyone back to your quarters. Evaluation begins at 600 tomorrow." As the crowd slowly dispersed, Williams remained on the mat with Maya, was beginning to stir, groaning softly as consciousness returned. In a few minutes, he would wake up to find his worldview fundamentally altered and his reputation in tatters. "That was quite a demonstration," Williams said quietly. "But you realize this doesn't end here. Has friends, supporters, people who share his views about women in combat roles. You've made enemies today." Maya nodded slowly. She had known the risks when she accepted his challenge, understood that defeating him publicly would have consequences beyond the immediate satisfaction of proving her point. "With respect, Chief," she said, "I've had enemies since the day I joined the military. At least now they know not to underestimate me." Williams studied her for a long moment, seeing not just a skilled fighter but a warrior with the mental toughness to handle whatever came next. "The real test starts tomorrow," he said finally. "Everything you've accomplished so far, every barrier you've broken, every doubter you've silenced, it all leads to what happens next." Maya looked around the empty gymnasium, at the mat where she had just fought for more than personal vindication. She had fought for every woman who had been told she wasn't strong enough, every person who had been judged by assumptions rather than achievements, every warrior who had ever been underestimated. "I'll be ready," she said, and Williams could hear in her voice that she meant it. As was helped to his feet by the medical staff, his eyes found Maya across the gymnasium. The hatred there was unmistakable, but so was something else, a grudging acknowledgement that he had underestimated his opponent. The fight was over, but Maya knew that the real battle was just beginning. She had proven that she could fight. Now she would have to prove that she could lead, that she could operate under pressure, that she could be trusted with the lives of her teammates in the most dangerous situations imaginable. The eyes of the entire Special Operations community would be watching, waiting for her to fail, ready to pounce on any mistake or weakness. But as Maya walked toward the exit, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months of preparation and training. For the first time since the selection process began, she felt like she truly belonged here. Not because of politics or quotas or anyone's desire for diversity, but because she had earned her place through skill, determination, and an unbreakable will to succeed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, new opportunities to prove herself. But tonight, for just a moment, Maya allowed herself to feel proud of how far she had come and confident about how much further she could go. The dawn came too soon and not soon enough. Maya had spent the night lying awake, staring at the ceiling of her assigned quarters while her mind replayed every second of the fight with. Sleep had been elusive, not because of regret or fear, but because of the electric anticipation that coursed through her veins. Today would determine whether yesterday's victory was a fluke or the first step toward something greater. She rose before the alarm, as was her habit, and went through her morning routine with mechanical precision. Every movement was deliberate, every preparation calculated to optimize her performance for the trials ahead. The face that looked back at her from the bathroom mirror showed no trace of uncertainty, though she could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. The mess hall buzzed with conversation as candidates filed in for what many suspected would be their last meal at the facility. Maya noticed the change in atmosphere immediately. Where yesterday there had been casual dismissal and barely concealed contempt, now there was wariness and something that might have been respect. Conversations quieted as she passed, eyes following her movement with new attention. She collected her breakfast tray and looked for a place to sit. Most tables fell silent as she approached, creating an awkward social minefield that she had no interest in navigating. Finally, Captain waved her over to a partially occupied table near the windows. "Sleep well?" asked with a knowing smile as Maya sat down. "Like a baby," Maya lied smoothly, earning a laugh from the other candidates at the table. "'S been telling everyone who'll listen that he slipped," said Lieutenant James Park, a soft-spoken Korean-American who had impressed everyone during the psychological evaluations. "Claims the mat was wet or something." Maya shrugged, cutting into her eggs with studied indifference. People see what they want to see. "Yeah, well, what I saw was textbook combat technique," said Sergeant Mike Torres, a former ranger whose respect was not easily earned. "That uppercut was perfectly placed. I've seen heavyweight boxers knocked out by worse shots." The praise was gratifying, but Maya knew it came with a price. Every positive comment would be noted by allies, every show of support for future retaliation. She was beginning to understand that her victory had not eliminated the opposition, but merely forced it underground. "Speaking of," said quietly, "he's been holding court with his crew since 500. Whatever they're planning, it's not going to be pretty." Maya followed subtle gesture toward a corner table where sat surrounded by a group of candidates who had made their positions on female integration clear from day one. Their conversation was too quiet to overhear, but the occasional glance in her direction left little doubt about the topic. His face showed the evidence of their encounter, a swollen jaw and a bruised ego that wouldn't heal as quickly. "Let them plan," Maya said, returning her attention to her meal. "I didn't come this far to back down from a fight." Chief Williams entered the mess hall precisely at 6:30, his presence immediately commanding attention from every candidate in the room. He wore the same expression he had maintained throughout the selection process: professional, impartial, and completely unreadable. If yesterday's events had affected his opinion of any candidate, positive or negative, he showed no sign of it. "Today begins the final phase of evaluation," Williams announced, his voice carrying easily across the silent room. "You have survived months of testing, both physical and mental. You have demonstrated skills that place you among the elite of the military community. But what happens today will determine whether you have what it takes to join the most exclusive brotherhood in the armed forces." Maya felt her pulse quicken. She had known this moment was coming, had trained for it with single-minded dedication, but hearing Williams describe the stakes in such stark terms brought the reality crashing home. Everything she had worked for, every sacrifice she had made, every barrier she had broken, it all came down to the next few hours. "The scenario is simple," Williams continued. "You will be divided into teams and inserted into a hostile environment. Your mission is to locate and extract a high-value target while avoiding or neutralizing enemy forces. The exercise will test your tactical skills, leadership ability, physical endurance, and mental toughness under extreme pressure." He paused, letting his eyes sweep across the assembled candidates. "The teams are not random. They are designed to replicate the challenges you will face in real-world operations, where you must work effectively with individuals who may not share your background, opinions, or approach to problem-solving." Maya felt a chill of premonition. Williams was looking directly at her now, and she could see something in his expression that confirmed her worst suspicions. "Team Alpha will be led by candidate," Williams announced. "His team members are candidates Park and Torres." The mess hall erupted in barely suppressed murmurs. Every candidate understood the implications immediately. Williams had deliberately placed Maya on's team, creating a situation where personal animosity would either be overcome through professional discipline or explode into catastrophic failure. His face showed a mixture of surprise and calculation. He had expected to be separated from Maya, not placed in direct command of her. The opportunity for revenge was obvious, but so were the risks. If his team failed because of interpersonal conflict, his own chances of selection would be destroyed. Maya felt the eyes of the entire room focused on her, waiting to see how she would react. Part of her wanted to protest, to point out the obvious unfairness of forcing her to serve under someone who had publicly questioned her qualifications. But another part, the part that had carried her through every previous challenge, recognized this as the ultimate test. "Team assignments are final," Williams said, cutting off any potential objections. "You have 30 minutes to gear up and receive your mission briefing. Transport leaves at 800 sharp." The next half hour passed in a blur of equipment checks and tactical preparations. Maya found herself working alongside teammates who were clearly uncomfortable with the situation but professional enough to focus on the mission requirements. Maintained a cold distance, communicating only when necessary and making no reference to their previous encounter. The briefing room was stark and windowless, dominated by a large screen that displayed satellite imagery of their target area. The terrain was brutal, dense forest broken by rocky outcroppings and swift-moving streams. Perfect conditions for an ambush, with limited visibility and multiple avenues of approach for hostile forces. "Your target is a foreign intelligence operative being held in this compound," the intelligence officer explained, highlighting a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley between two. "The facility is guarded by an unknown number of enemy combatants using standard military equipment and tactics." Maya studied the imagery with professional interest, noting potential approach routes and escape corridors. The compound was well-positioned defensively, with clear fields of fire in multiple directions. A frontal assault would be suicide, but the surrounding forest offered opportunities for infiltration if executed properly. "Your insertion point is here," the briefing continued, the screen shifting to show a landing zone several kilometers from the target. "You'll have to move cross-country to reach the objective. Be advised that enemy patrols are active throughout the area, and they have been briefed to expect rescue attempts." Spoke for the first time since entering the room. "What about extraction?" "Primary extraction point is here," the officer replied, indicating a clearing northwest of the compound. "Secondary is here if the primary is compromised. Your window for extraction is 6 hours from insertion. Miss that window and you'll be spending the night in the field." The implication was clear. This wasn't just a test of tactical skills, but of time management and decision-making under pressure. Teams that moved too slowly or became down in firefights would face additional challenges that could doom their mission. "Any questions?" the officer asked. Looked around at his team, his expression unreadable. Maya could see him weighing options, calculating approaches, trying to determine how to use each team member most effectively. When his eyes met hers, she saw no trace of the personal animosity that had driven their confrontation. This was a different, still arrogant, still convinced of his own superiority, but professional enough to recognize that failure here would destroy his career. "No questions," said finally. "We're ready." The helicopter ride to the insertion point was conducted in tense silence. Maya found herself studying her teammates, trying to gauge their readiness and commitment. Was rock solid, a proven leader who could be counted on under pressure. Park was brilliant but untested in live-fire situations. Torres had the experience and skills but seemed uncomfortable with the team dynamics. Sat across from her, his attention focused on the mission briefing he was reviewing for the third time. Maya wondered what he was thinking, whether he was planning to use this exercise as an opportunity for payback, or whether his professionalism would override personal considerations. The helicopter touched down in a clearing surrounded by dense forest, its rotors kicking up clouds of dust and debris. The team disembarked quickly, shouldering their equipment packs and moving immediately toward the tree line. Behind them, the aircraft lifted off and disappeared into the morning sky, leaving them alone in potentially hostile territory. Called for a tactical halt once they were concealed in the forest. The team formed a defensive perimeter while he pulled out a topographic map and began planning their route to the target. "We'll move in a diamond formation," announced quietly, his voice barely audible above the sounds of the forest. "Takes point, Park and Torres on the flanks, brings up the rear. I'll maintain position in the center with communications." Maya nodded acknowledgement, nodding that had assigned her the most isolated position. It could be interpreted as lack of trust, but she recognized it as tactically sound. The rear guard was critical for detecting pursuit and preventing ambush from behind. It was also a position that required someone capable of independent action if the team became separated. They moved through the forest with practiced stealth, each team member maintaining proper spacing and communication discipline. Maya found herself impressed despite her reservations about his leadership. Whatever his personal failings, he had clearly studied small unit tactics and knew how to move a team through hostile territory. The first hour passed without incident. They made good time through relatively open terrain, covering nearly 2 kilometers while avoiding the obvious trails and clearings where enemy patrols might be waiting. Maya began to allow herself the hope that this might actually work, that professionalism would override personal animosity. That hope died when his voice crackled through their radio headsets. Contact front, multiple hostiles approximately 200 meters ahead. Immediately called for a halt, the team dropping into concealment behind fallen trees and rocky outcroppings. Through the undergrowth, Maya could see movement in the distance, armed figures in camouflage gear conducting what appeared to be a routine patrol. "How many?" whispered into his radio. "Count 6, possibly more out of sight," replied. "They're moving perpendicular to our route, should pass without detecting us if we stay put." Considered their options. The smart play was to wait for the patrol to pass and continue toward the objective. But Maya could see something else in his expression, an eagerness for action that had nothing to do with tactical necessity and everything to do with proving himself after yesterday's humiliation. "We're going to take them out," announced, his decision surprising everyone on the team. "Sir, that's not necessary," Torres responded immediately. "We can bypass them easily." "Negative. These hostiles could interfere with our extraction or alert other units to our presence. We eliminate them now while we have the advantage of surprise." Maya felt a chill of understanding. Wasn't making this decision based on mission requirements or tactical advantage. He was looking for an opportunity to demonstrate dominance, to show his teammates that he was still the alpha predator despite yesterday's setback. The fact that it unnecessarily endangered the mission and their lives was secondary to his need for validation. "You'll provide overwatch from that ridge," continued, pointing to a position that would isolate her from the main assault. "Everyone else will execute a coordinated attack on my signal." Maya keyed her radio carefully. "Sir, I recommend we reconsider. This engagement isn't necessary for mission success." His response was immediate and sharp. "I didn't ask for recommendations, you have your orders." The dismissal was clearly intended to establish hierarchy and authority, but Maya could hear something else beneath the surface. Was using his command position to marginalize her, ensuring that when the team's success was evaluated, her contribution would be minimal. She wanted to argue further, to point out the tactical flaws in his plan, but military discipline ran too deep. Was the designated team leader, and questioning his orders in front of the others would undermine unit cohesion regardless of her motivations. "Understood," she replied, moving toward the designated overwatch position. The ridge provided an excellent view of the entire engagement area, allowing Maya to track both her teammates' movement and the enemy patrol's position. She could see immediately that his plan had serious flaws. The assault force would have to cross open ground to reach effective engagement range, exposing them to return fire. The patrol's route would take them near a natural choke point where they could establish defensive positions if they detected the attack in advance. Maya keyed her radio again, trying one more time to prevent what she saw as an inevitable disaster. "Alpha Leader, I have eyes on the target area. Recommend alternate approach from the northeast. Current route exposes the assault team unnecessarily." His response was curt. "Maintain radio silence unless you have priority traffic. Execute on my mark." Maya gritted her teeth and settled into firing position. She could provide covering fire for her teammates when things went wrong, but she couldn't prevent from making a catastrophic tactical error. All she could do was be ready to limit the damage when his ego-driven decision-making caught up with reality. The attack began exactly as Maya had feared. His assault team moved into position with reasonable stealth, but their approach route forced them across a natural clearing just as the enemy patrol reached the choke point Maya had identified. The first shots came from the hostiles, who had apparently detected movement and taken cover behind fallen logs and rocky outcroppings. What followed was a textbook example of how not to conduct a small unit assault. His team found themselves pinned down in the open, taking accurate fire from entrenched positions, with limited options for advance or withdrawal. Within minutes, two team members were simulating combat wounds that would have been fatal in a real engagement. Maya watched through her scope as the situation deteriorated rapidly. Was clearly out of his depth, his commands becoming increasingly frantic and contradictory as the reality of combat overwhelmed his theoretical knowledge. The enemy patrol, meanwhile, was executing a disciplined defense that spoke of extensive training and experience. "Alpha leader, you need to withdraw immediately," Maya transmitted, abandoning any pretense of following's communication restrictions. "Your position is untenable." "Negative," his voice was strained with stress and embarrassment. "We can break through their position. I need suppressing fire on the left flank." Maya could see that his left flank was already collapsed, the simulated casualties having eliminated his fire team's effectiveness in that sector. Providing suppressing fire would accomplish nothing except to reveal her position and eliminate the team's only remaining tactical advantage. "Sir, the left flank is compromised," she responded. "Recommend immediate withdrawal to secondary position." "That's an order. Lay down suppressing fire now." Maya faced a decision that went to the heart of military discipline and professional judgment. Was clearly giving orders that would result in mission failure and potentially cause casualties in a real combat situation. Following those orders would validate his poor leadership and contribute to the team's defeat. Refusing them would be insubordination, regardless of her motivations. She made her choice. Instead of firing blindly at enemy positions as ordered, Maya used her elevated position and superior angle to identify the patrol leader, the figure directing the enemy defense from a concealed position behind the team's right flank. One precisely aimed shot eliminated him from the exercise, causing immediate confusion in the hostile ranks. Maya then shifted her aim to the heavy weapons position that had been pinning down the assault team. Two more shots simulated the destruction of their primary support weapon, fundamentally altering the tactical balance of the engagement. With the enemy leadership and heavy weapons neutralized, his team was finally able to execute a successful withdrawal. They fell back to the secondary position Maya had initially recommended, battered and demoralized, but intact. His face was flushed with anger and embarrassment when the team regrouped. He had lost control of the engagement within minutes of initiating contact, and only Maya's intervention had prevented complete disaster. The fact that she had been right about the tactical situation and that her disobedience of his orders had saved the team only made his humiliation more complete. "What the hell was that?" demanded, his voice barely controlled. "I gave you a direct order." Maya met his gaze steadily. "I prioritized mission success over individual commands that would have compromised team safety." "You prioritized your own judgment over military discipline," shot back. "In a real combat situation, that kind of insubordination gets people killed." "In a real combat situation," Maya replied quietly, "poor leadership gets people killed. I adapted to changing tactical conditions to achieve mission objectives." The argument was interrupted by his voice on the radio. "We need to move. That firefight probably alerted every hostile unit in the area. Our window for reaching the objective just got a lot smaller." Looked around at his team, seeing the doubt in their eyes for the first time. The engagement had been a disaster, saved only by the actions of the team member he had been trying to marginalize. His authority as leader was now openly questioned, and everyone knew it. "Fine," said finally. "We continue to the objective, but this conversation isn't over." Maya shouldered her rifle and checked her equipment. The mission was less than 2 hours old, and already the team was facing challenges that had nothing to do with enemy action or terrain difficulties. His need to prove himself was becoming a liability that threatened everyone's success. But as they resumed movement toward the target compound, Maya felt something she hadn't expected. For all the personal animosity and professional conflict, she was beginning to understand something important about leadership under pressure. Failures weren't just tactical or strategic. They were fundamentally about character. A true leader prioritized mission success over personal validation, team welfare over individual ego. The lessons she was learning in this forest would serve her well in the challenges ahead. But first, she had to survive the next 4 hours with a team leader whose pride might prove more dangerous than any enemy they would face. The compound appeared through the forest canopy like a fortress from another era. Maya crouched behind a fallen log, studying the target through her binoculars, while the rest of the team maintained security around their observation post. The intelligence briefing had been accurate about the facility's defensive positioning, but seeing it in person revealed additional challenges that would test every skill they had developed over months of training. 3 buildings formed a rough triangle within a cleared perimeter, connected by covered walkways that would provide protection for defenders moving between positions. Guard towers anchored each corner of the compound, their elevated positions offering commanding views of all approach routes. Maya counted at least 8 hostiles moving with the disciplined precision of professional soldiers, not the casual militia forces she had hoped to encounter. Lay beside her, his own binoculars focused on the main building where their target was supposedly being held. His jaw was still swollen from their encounter 2 days ago, and Maya could see the tension in his posture that spoke of barely controlled frustration. The earlier firefight had shaken his confidence, though he would never admit it openly. "Perimeter security is tight," muttered, more to himself than to the team. "We're looking at a coordinated assault or extended surveillance to identify patterns." Maya lowered her binoculars and pulled out a tactical notebook, sketching the compound's layout with quick, precise strokes. Her training had emphasized the importance of detailed reconnaissance, understanding that hasty action based on incomplete information led to mission failure and casualties. "Guard rotation changes every 15 minutes, she observed quietly. "Northeast Tower has a blind spot during the transition, approximately 30 seconds where that sector is uncovered." Turned to look at her, and she could see the internal struggle playing out behind his eyes. Her tactical assessment was correct, and he knew it, but accepting her input meant acknowledging her value to the team. His pride warred with his professional judgment, creating a paralysis that was becoming increasingly dangerous as their mission window narrowed. "Tors, what do you see from the western approach?" called softly into his radio, seeking other opinions rather than engaging directly with Maya's analysis. "Heavy vegetation provides good concealment until the last 50 meters, Tors replied from his position, overlooking the compound's rear entrance. "But they've cleared fields of fire that would turn any assault into a shooting gallery." His voice joined the tactical discussion from her observation post on the eastern flank. "I count 3 roving patrols in addition to the fixed positions. They're running random patterns, professional-level security." Park, monitoring radio communications from the team's central position, added another complication. "Intercepting regular check-ins with what sounds like a larger force. These aren't isolated guards, they're part of a broader defensive network." Maya felt the familiar weight of tactical complexity settling over the team. What had initially appeared to be a straightforward extraction mission was revealing itself as a multi-layered challenge that would require precise coordination and flawless execution. One mistake would compromise not only their mission, but potentially their survival in what was becoming an increasingly realistic training scenario. Studied the compound for several more minutes, his face showing the strain of command under pressure. Maya could see him cycling through options, rejecting approaches that seemed too risky or complicated, searching for a solution that would guarantee success while minimizing his dependence on team members whose loyalty he questioned. "We'll wait for nightfall," finally announced. "Reduced visibility will give us better concealment for infiltration." Maya felt a chill of concern. Night operations were exponentially more complex, requiring specialized equipment and skills that not all team members possessed equally. More critically, waiting would consume precious hours from their already limited mission window, potentially forcing them to attempt extraction under even more challenging conditions. "Sir," Maya said carefully, "nightfall is still 4 hours away. That puts us dangerously close to our extraction deadline." His response was sharp with irritation. "I'm aware of the timeline. Night operations offer our best chance of success." "Respectfully, sir, I think we should consider alternatives. The guard rotation patterns suggest a window during the 1400-hour shift change where we could exploit multiple vulnerabilities simultaneously." His face darkened. Maya was doing it again, questioning his judgment in front of the team, offering alternatives that highlighted the flaws in his planning. From his perspective, her input wasn't tactical advice, but insubordination dressed up as professionalism. "The decision is made," said firmly. "We wait for darkness." Maya bit back her response, recognizing that further argument would only entrench position. But as she settled in for a long afternoon of surveillance, she began developing contingency plans based on scenarios where this approach proved inadequate or disastrous. The hours passed slowly, tension building within the team as the mission window steadily contracted. Maya used the time productively, continuing to map guard patterns and identify potential approaches, but she could see her teammates growing increasingly restless as valuable daylight slipped away. Torres was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. "Sir, we're cutting this pretty fine. If anything goes wrong during the infiltration, we'll miss the primary extraction window." His response revealed the pressure he was feeling. "I said the decision is made, Sergeant. Focus on your assigned sector and let me worry about timeline management." The sharp tone silenced further discussion, but Maya could see the doubt spreading through the team like a virus. Military discipline demanded obedience to lawful orders, but that discipline was being tested by growing awareness that its decisions were driven more by personal considerations than tactical necessity. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the forest, Maya noticed something that made her pulse quicken. The compound's activity level was increasing, with additional personnel arriving and departing on what appeared to be a regular schedule. More critically, she observed preparations that suggested the defenders were aware of potential rescue attempts and were actively strengthening their security posture. "Movement in the compound," she reported quietly. "Looks like they're expecting company." Shifted his attention to the main building, where several figures in different uniforms were conducting what appeared to be a leadership meeting. The implications were troubling. If the defenders knew a rescue attempt was imminent, they would be prepared for exactly the kind of night infiltration was planning. "Just routine security measures," said dismissively, but Maya could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. His voice crackled through their headsets with additional bad news. "Picking up increased radio traffic. Sounds like they're coordinating with external security forces." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. What had begun as a manageable challenge was evolving into a scenario where the defenders held every advantage: superior numbers, defensive positions, early warning systems, and external support. This delay had allowed the enemy to prepare for exactly the kind of assault his team was planning. Maya made a decision that would define her military career. "Sir, I request permission to speak privately." Looked at her with suspicious eyes, clearly expecting another challenge to his authority. But the formality of her request, the careful adherence to military protocol, seemed to catch him off guard. "Make it quick," he said, moving away from the other team members' positions. When they were alone, Maya faced directly, her expression serious but respectful. "Sir, I think we're walking into a trap. The increased security activity suggests they know we're coming. A night assault under these conditions has a very low probability of success." His initial impulse was to dismiss her concerns, but something in Maya's tone made him pause. This wasn't the insubordination he had come to expect, but professional assessment delivered with genuine concern for mission success and team safety. "What are you suggesting?" he asked reluctantly. Maya pulled out her tactical notebook, showing him the detailed sketches she had been developing throughout their surveillance period. "There's a window during the 1600 shift change where multiple factors align in our favor. Guard rotation creates a blind spot here," she pointed to her drawing. "Just as the roving patrol reaches its furthest point from the main building, we have approximately 3 minutes where the target building is minimally defended." Studied her analysis, and Maya could see him recognizing the quality of her reconnaissance and planning. The approach she was proposing was aggressive but well-reasoned, based on hours of careful observation rather than wishful thinking. "The extraction timeline is tight," pointed out, though his tone had lost its earlier hostility. "Yes, sir, but achievable if we execute properly. The longer we wait, the stronger their defensive posture becomes. They're clearly expecting a night infiltration. Let's give them something they're not prepared for." Was quiet for a long moment, weighing options that all carried significant risks. Maya could see the internal struggle between his desire to maintain control and his growing recognition that her tactical assessment was superior to his own. "If we do this," said finally, "I lead the assault team. You provide overwatch and extraction support." Maya wanted to argue that her skills would be better utilized in the infiltration itself, but she recognized this as an attempt to save face while accepting her plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. "Understood, sir. I'll establish position here." She indicated a ridge that offered clear sight lines to multiple compound exits, and coordinate extraction timing. They returned to the team, where outlined a modified plan that incorporated Maya's reconnaissance while maintaining his authority as mission leader. The other team members received the briefing with obvious relief. After hours of inaction, they were finally moving toward mission completion. The assault began precisely at 1600 hours, with leading and tours in a carefully coordinated infiltration while Park maintained communications and Maya provided overwatch support. The approach was textbook perfect, exploiting the defensive gaps Maya had identified to reach the target building undetected. But as the team breached the main building, Maya's worst fears were realized. The structure was empty except for a single room containing what was obviously a training mannequin dressed to simulate their target. They had walked into an elaborate trap, designed to test their decision-making under pressure and their ability to adapt when operations went catastrophically wrong. "Negative contact with primary target's voice came through Maya's headset, tight with stress and embarrassment. "Building is empty. This is a setup." Maya's scope swept the compound's perimeter, looking for signs of the encirclement she knew was coming. Professional defenders wouldn't just allow an assault team to discover their deception and withdraw safely. This was about to become a survival exercise with very real consequences for career advancement and personal safety. "Movement on all approaches," Maya reported, her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "We've got multiple teams converging on your position. Estimate 2 squads, heavily armed, professional movement." His team was trapped in the building with no obvious escape route. The covered walkways that had provided defensive advantages for the compound's original occupants now served as corridors of death for anyone attempting to flee. Maya could see muzzle flashes beginning to appear as the encircling forces opened fire, turning the extraction into a desperate fighting withdrawal. "Alpha Team, you need to move now," Maya transmitted urgently. "Western exit offers your best chance, but you'll be exposed for 50 meters across open ground." "Negative," responded. "Too much hostile fire, we're pinned down." Maya could see the tactical situation with crystalline clarity from her elevated position. His team was making the classic mistake of prioritizing immediate safety over strategic necessity. Every second they remained in the building, their situation became more desperate as the hostile forces completed their encirclement. She faced another moment of decision that would define her relationship with military authority. Was clearly overwhelmed by the tactical complexity, but he remained the designated team leader. Following his lead would likely result in mission failure and potentially simulated casualties that would eliminate team members from the selection process. Taking independent action would be insubordination, regardless of the outcome. Maya chose mission success over military protocol. Using her elevated position and superior angles, she began systematically eliminating key targets in the hostile force. Her first shots took out the squad leader directing the encirclement from behind the guard tower, causing immediate confusion in their tactical coordination. Her second engagement neutralized the heavy weapons team that had been Pinning's group in the building. "Alpha Team, move now," Maya commanded, abandoning any pretense of following's leadership. "Western exit bound by teams, I'll provide covering fire." This time didn't argue. The survival instinct overrode his pride, and he led his team in a desperate sprint across the compound's killing field. Maya's precisely aimed shots disrupted multiple attempts to establish effective ambush positions, creating the narrow window of opportunity his team needed to reach the forest perimeter. But as team reached relative safety, Maya realized her own position had been compromised. Her muzzle flashes had revealed her location to the remaining hostile forces, and she was now taking accurate return fire from multiple directions. Her elevated position, which had provided such excellent overwatch capabilities, was rapidly becoming a death trap. "Alpha Team clear," reported, his voice reflecting a mixture of relief and grudging admiration. "What's your status?" Maya's response was interrupted by a near miss that sent rock fragments spraying across her position. She was effectively pinned down, with hostile forces closing on her location from two directions. The route team had used to escape was no longer available, and her remaining options were increasingly limited. "Taking fire from multiple positions," she reported, trying to keep the stress out of her voice. "May need to find alternate extraction route." What followed was a running gun battle through dense forest that tested every skill Maya had developed over years of tactical training. She moved from position to position, using terrain and vegetation to break contact with pursuing forces, but she could feel them closing the distance with each successive engagement. The irony of her situation wasn't lost on her. Having saved team through decisive action and superior tactical skills, she was now isolated and increasingly desperate, facing the very real possibility that her rescue of others would result in her own elimination from the selection process. But as Maya fought her way through the forest, she discovered something about herself that transcended tactical skills or physical capabilities. Under extreme pressure, when her military career hung in the balance and her personal safety was genuinely threatened, she didn't break. Instead, she became more focused, more determined, more creative in finding solutions to seemingly impossible challenges. She would make it to the extraction point, not because she was stronger or faster or better equipped than her pursuers, but because she refused to accept failure as an option. Pride and poor leadership had created this crisis, but Maya's determination and tactical excellence would resolve it. The question was whether would recognize her contribution, or whether his ego would demand that he take credit for the team's ultimate success. As Maya fought her way toward salvation, she realized that the answer would determine not just her own future, but the kind of leader she would become if given the chance. Maya's lungs burned as she sprinted through the dense undergrowth, branches tearing at her tactical gear, while the sound of pursuit grew closer behind her. 3 hostile teams were converging on her position, their radio chatter indicating a level of coordination that spoke of extensive training and real-world experience. What had begun as a training exercise was rapidly evolving into something that felt uncomfortably like actual combat. She dropped behind a massive fallen oak tree, using the momentary concealment to check her ammunition and assess her tactical situation. The numbers were stark and unforgiving. She had perhaps 20 rounds remaining, no backup weapons, and limited options for resupply or reinforcement. Meanwhile, her pursuers had the advantages of superior numbers, better knowledge of the terrain, and communication networks that allowed them to coordinate their movements with military precision. Maya's radio crackled with his voice. The transmission revealing his location was now several hundred meters away and moving toward the extraction point. "What's your status? We're at Checkpoint Alpha, preparing for extraction." The question highlighted her isolation in stark terms. His team had reached relative safety while she remained trapped in an increasingly desperate situation, fighting a running battle against overwhelming odds. Part of her wanted to demand immediate support, to use her radio to call in assistance from teammates who owed their survival to her tactical intervention. But another part, the part that understood military hierarchies and the politics of selection processes, recognized that such a request would be seen as weakness rather than tactical necessity. "Still evading hostile pursuit," Maya replied, keeping her voice steady despite the stress flooding her system. "Will make my own way to extraction." His response revealed the complexity of his position. As team leader, he was responsible for all team members and should have been coordinating a rescue effort. But as a candidate whose own performance had been questionable, he couldn't afford to jeopardize his team's mission success for someone whose independence had repeatedly challenged his authority. "Copy that. We'll maintain position at Checkpoint Alpha for 15 minutes, then move to primary extraction if you haven't linked up." Maya understood the subtext immediately, was giving her 15 minutes to solve her own problems before abandoning her to focus on his own survival. It was a decision that made tactical sense, but revealed everything about his character and leadership philosophy. When the pressure mounted and hard choices had to be made, would prioritize his own interests over team loyalty or military brotherhood. The realization was liberating in an unexpected way. Maya had spent months trying to prove herself worthy of acceptance by men who would never truly accept her as an equal. She had endured their skepticism, their subtle sabotage, their constant testing of her resolve, always hoping that exceptional performance would eventually overcome institutional prejudice. Now, facing potential elimination from the program through no fault of her own, she finally understood that their acceptance wasn't worth pursuing. Maya rose from her concealment and began moving again, but with a different mindset than before. Instead of fighting to prove herself to and his allies, she was now fighting for her own definition of what it meant to be elite. Instead of seeking validation from others, she was validating herself through actions that transcended political considerations and personal animosity. The forest provided multiple opportunities for tactical creativity that Maya exploited with increasing confidence. She used fallen trees and rocky outcroppings to create choke points where pursuing forces would be channeled into predetermined kill zones. She employed noise discipline and camouflage techniques to break contact and establish new positions before her enemies could react effectively. Most importantly, she began thinking several moves ahead, anticipating her pursuers' decisions and positioning herself to exploit their predictable responses. The first major engagement came when Maya detected one of the pursuit teams moving along a game trail that would bring them directly into an ambush position she had prepared. Instead of avoiding contact, she decided to eliminate one of the three teams pursuing her, reducing the tactical complexity of her situation while demonstrating the kind of aggressive leadership that elite units valued. Maya positioned herself on a ridge overlooking the trail, with multiple escape routes identified and prepared. When the hostile team moved into the kill zone, she engaged with precision that would have impressed her instructors under training conditions. 3 shots, 3 simulated casualties, and the pursuing team was eliminated as an effective force. The engagement sent ripples throughout the hostile command structure, as radio communications revealed confusion about how a single operator was systematically defeating multiple teams. Maya used their temporary disorganization to relocate to an entirely different area, forcing her remaining pursuers to restart their search patterns and giving herself precious time to plan her approach to the extraction point. But as Maya moved through the forest with renewed confidence, she encountered an unexpected obstacle that threatened to undo all her tactical success. A stream that had appeared manageable on the briefing maps was running high due to recent rainfall, creating a water obstacle that would expose her to hostile fire during any crossing attempt. The alternative routes would add significant time to her movement, potentially causing her to miss the extraction window entirely. Maya studied the tactical problem with growing frustration. The stream was perhaps 30 meters wide, with swift current and minimal concealment on either bank. Any attempt to cross would make her visible to hostile forces for several minutes, plenty of time for accurate sniper fire from concealed positions. But bypassing the obstacle would consume time she couldn't afford, particularly given its limited commitment to waiting for her arrival. The solution came from an unexpected source: her memory of Chief Williams' lectures about unconventional warfare and the importance of thinking beyond standard tactical doctrines. Instead of trying to cross the stream covertly, Maya decided to use it as a tactical advantage by creating the appearance of a crossing attempt while actually moving to an entirely different location. Maya selected a highly visible crossing point where any hostile observers would naturally focus their attention, then carefully prepared a deception that would draw their fire while she moved to safety. Using spare equipment and natural materials, she created what appeared to be a human figure attempting to cross the stream, complete with movement patterns that would seem realistic from a distance. When the shooting started, Maya was already 300 meters downstream, using the noise and distraction of the engagement to mask her movement across the water at a location where hostile forces weren't expecting activity. By the time her pursuers realized they had been deceived, she was already on the opposite bank and moving rapidly toward the extraction point. The final approach to Checkpoint Alpha required Maya to traverse open ground that would expose her to observation from multiple directions. She could see team in the distance, maintaining defensive positions while watching for her arrival, but she could also detect signs of hostile pursuit that indicated her remaining enemies were still actively searching for her location. Maya made the crossing in a series of short sprints, using every piece of available cover to minimize her exposure while maintaining forward momentum. Each movement was calculated to present the smallest possible target while maximizing her progress towards safety. It was a display of tactical movement that would have earned high marks in any training scenario, made more impressive by the stress and exhaustion she had endured over the previous hours. She reached position with less than 5 minutes remaining before their scheduled departure, her arrival prompting visible relief from team members who had begun to assume she wouldn't make the extraction window. But Maya's attention was focused on himself, whose expression revealed a complex mixture of emotions that included surprise, grudging respect, and something that might have been disappointment that she had survived her ordeal. "Glad you could make it," said, his tone carefully neutral. "We were getting ready to move out." Maya nodded acknowledgement while checking her equipment and preparing for the next phase of their mission. She had successfully evaded multiple pursuit teams, eliminated one of them entirely, and reached the extraction point within the designated timeline. By any objective measure, her performance had been exceptional, demonstrating exactly the kind of tactical skills and mental toughness that elite units required. But as the team prepared to move toward the primary extraction landing zone, Maya noticed something in the way was positioning his team members that suggested her ordeal wasn't over. Instead of acknowledging her tactical success or integrating her back into the team structure, was subtly isolating her, assigning her to positions that would minimize her contribution to whatever challenges lay ahead. Maya realized that ego couldn't tolerate the reality that she had not only survived independently, but had actually outperformed his leadership throughout the entire mission. Her success highlighted his failures, her tactical creativity exposed his limitations, and her determination to succeed despite his neglect revealed his character flaws in ways that would be impossible to ignore during the evaluation process. The helicopter extraction that followed was conducted under simulated hostile fire, requiring the team to establish defensive positions while waiting for their transport to arrive. Positioned Maya in an isolated sector where her fields of fire didn't overlap with other team members, effectively ensuring that her contribution to the team's defense would be minimal and difficult to evaluate. But Maya had learned something during her solo battle through the forest that transcended tactical skills or physical endurance. She had discovered that true elite performance wasn't about seeking approval from others or conforming to their expectations. It was about maintaining personal standards of excellence regardless of external validation, about leading through example even when formal authority was, and about preserving integrity under pressure that would break lesser individuals. As their helicopter lifted off from the extraction zone, carrying them back to the evaluation facility, Maya looked out at the forest where she had fought her most important battle. It hadn't been against hostile forces or difficult terrain, but against the assumption that her worth as a soldier depended on the approval of men who would never accept her as an equal. Chief Williams was waiting when their helicopter touched down, his expression unreadable as he observed the team's debriefing process. Maya knew that her performance would be evaluated not just on tactical skills or mission success, but on leadership potential and the ability to function under extreme pressure. Would undoubtedly emphasize his role in the team's ultimate success while minimizing her contributions, but Williams had ways of determining what had really happened during their time in the field. As Maya prepared for what she knew would be the most important evaluation of her military career, she felt something she hadn't experienced since the selection process began. Instead of anxiety about whether she would be accepted into the elite unit, she felt confidence that she had already proven everything that mattered about her capabilities and character. The question wasn't whether Maya was elite material. The question was whether the military's most exclusive unit was ready for the kind of leader she had proven herself to be. And for the first time since arriving at the facility, Maya was prepared to accept either answer with equal dignity. The debriefing room felt smaller than Maya remembered, its stark white walls and fluorescent lighting creating an atmosphere of clinical evaluation that made every candidate appear pale and exhausted. She sat in a metal chair that had been positioned precisely 3 feet from Chief Williams' desk, maintaining perfect military posture despite the fatigue that threatened to overwhelm her after 36 hours of continuous evaluation. Williams studied the mission reports spread across his desk with the methodical attention of someone who had spent decades evaluating elite soldiers under the most challenging conditions imaginable. His dark eyes moved between the official documentation and the personal observations he had recorded throughout the selection process, building a comprehensive picture of each candidate's performance that went far beyond simple success or failure metrics. Maya watched his face for any sign of his conclusions, but Williams had perfected the art of revealing nothing until he was ready to speak. She had learned to respect his judgment during the months of training, recognizing that his standards were not arbitrary but based on real-world experience in situations where the difference between excellent and merely good could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. "Interesting exercise," Williams said finally, his voice neutral but carrying undertones that suggested he had observed more than what appeared in the official reports. Team Alpha accomplished their primary objective within the designated, but not without significant complications. Maya remained silent, understanding that this was not yet her opportunity to speak. The debriefing process followed established protocols designed to elicit honest assessments rather than self-serving narratives, and interrupting Williams would demonstrate exactly the kind of ego-driven behavior that elite units could not tolerate. "Candidate," Williams continued, consulting his notes, "your team leadership began with a tactical decision that resulted in unnecessary engagement with hostile forces. Explain your reasoning." Shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable with having his decisions challenged in front of the team members who had witnessed their consequences. His jaw was still swollen from his encounter with Maya 3 days earlier, serving as a constant reminder of the pride and poor judgment that had characterized his performance throughout the selection process. "Sir, I assess the hostile patrol as a potential threat to our primary mission," replied, his voice carefully controlled. "Eliminating them preemptively prevented complications during our extraction phase." Williams nodded once, making a note that Maya couldn't see. "And the result of that engagement?" "We successfully eliminated the hostile patrol and continued toward our objective," said, his answer technically accurate but omitting crucial details about how the engagement had actually unfolded. "Candidate," Williams said, turning his attention to Maya, "your perspective on Team Alpha's first hostile contact." Maya felt the weight of stare, knowing that her response would be carefully analyzed for evidence of disloyalty or insubordination. But she had decided during her solo battle through the forest that truth was more important than political considerations, that her integrity mattered more than approval. "Sir, the engagement was tactically unnecessary and strategically counterproductive," Maya said clearly. "The hostile patrol posed no immediate threat to our mission timeline or route to the objective. The firefight consumed ammunition, revealed our presence to other enemy forces, and created casualties that reduced our operational effectiveness." His face flushed with anger, but Williams' expression remained perfectly neutral as he made additional notes. Maya could see that her candid assessment had surprised the other team members, who had expected her to provide diplomatic answers that wouldn't challenge leadership narrative. "The engagement was ultimately successful," interjected, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Any tactical officer can second-guess decisions after the fact." Williams held up a hand, silencing before he could continue. "Candidate, you'll have opportunities to present your perspective. Right now, I'm interested in candidate's tactical assessment." Maya felt a moment of uncertainty. Williams was giving her unprecedented latitude to critique her team leader's performance, but she couldn't determine whether this was a test of her analytical abilities or a trap designed to reveal character flaws. Either way, her commitment to honesty demanded that she continue. "Sir, the engagement demonstrated several leadership challenges that affected our mission effectiveness. The assault plan exposed our team to unnecessary risk. Communication protocols broke down under pressure, and tactical flexibility was limited by rigid adherence to a flawed initial concept." The room fell silent except for the soft sound of Williams' pen moving across paper. Maya could feel the tension radiating from, and the uncomfortable awareness from her other teammates that they were witnessing a fundamental clash between different leadership philosophies. "Continue," Williams said quietly. Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would define her relationship with everyone in the room. "Sir, effective leadership requires the ability to adapt to changing conditions, accept input from subordinates, and prioritize mission success over personal validation. When those principles are compromised, entire teams suffer the consequences." Couldn't contain himself any longer. "This is ridiculous, Chief. Has been insubordinate from day one, questioning orders, undermining authority, and now she's using this debriefing to attack my leadership. Her attitude is exactly what makes mixed-gender units problematic." Williams' expression hardened slightly, the first sign of emotion Maya had seen from him during the entire process. "Candidate, explain your reference to mixed-gender units." realized immediately that he had made a critical error, allowing his personal prejudices to surface during an official evaluation. But having already committed himself, he pressed forward with the kind of reckless determination that had characterized his entire approach to the selection process. Sir, female soldiers bring complications that compromise unit cohesion and operational effectiveness. They require special accommodations, create interpersonal tensions, and lack the physical capabilities necessary for elite operations. Performance proves that diversity initiatives have gone too far. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya could see shock and disgust on the faces of mentors, while Park looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. Had just articulated the biases that Maya had faced throughout her career, but doing so in an official setting where his words would become part of his permanent record. William set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, studying with the kind of attention that Maya had seen him reserve for particularly interesting tactical problems. When he finally spoke, his voice carried authority that made everyone in the room straighten involuntarily. Candidate in 30 years of military service, I have commanded units in every major conflict of the modern era. I have led soldiers into combat situations where failure meant death, not just mission compromise. And in all that time, I have learned that elite performance has nothing to do with demographics and everything to do with character, skill, and the willingness to sacrifice personal interests for team success. His face had gone pale, recognition dawning that his prejudices had just destroyed any chance of selection into the elite unit he had coveted for years. Williams continued, "Your tactical assessment of the first engagement was completely accurate. The decision to initiate unnecessary contact revealed poor judgment that could have compromised the entire mission. Your intervention during the firefight demonstrated exactly the kind of tactical flexibility and independent thinking that elite operations require." Maya felt a surge of validation, but Williams wasn't finished. "However, your